Welcome back to the garage. We're out here again in the 76 Nova. Last week's episode we worked on hooking up the 3-wire for the alternator, rewiring in our voltmeter over here, and hooking up the charge indicator light here. Now, a little backstory, I made this gauge cluster about 2 years ago. The original gauge cluster that came in this car, I mean this is a base model car, so it was just a speedo, fuel gauge, and then some idiot lights. Well, pretty much all the lights in the gauge cluster didn't work, and the speedo itself would lock up and freeze constantly. So instead of rebuilding that gauge cluster, which didn't really tell much information anyways, I went ahead and made this custom one. So while I was in there hooking up the charge indicator light though, I was taking a look, and I'm really not happy with the wiring job I did on this thing 2 years ago. And I'm also really not happy with these indicator lights that I have in here. They're just some cheap Chinese LEDs that I bought way back when. So I've got new lights. I also, over here in this corner is the oil pressure gauge. This, besides the speedo, is the only mechanical gauge left in the car. So we're going to change this over to an electronic oil pressure gauge. That way we don't have any fluids flowing into the car. It also makes it easier for removal if I ever need to pull this thing out. And then beyond that, like I said, we're going to change out these indicator lights. I have some newer, updated ones that are much better quality. So anyways, we're going to get this thing pulled out. We're going to get it stripped down. We're going to start working on getting our new lights in and redoing the wiring. So, as I mentioned, this is the rat's nest we're dealing with here. So what we're going to do is kind of go through, clean this up a little bit, tidy it up. I got some of these. They're little kind of like, I don't know what you call those, like little mounts or something that you can stick on here. And then they got these slots you can slip these zip ties through so we can kind of help channel the wiring across here. And, well, yeah, hopefully not have this. So anyways, we're going to get this all torn down and get it ready to start reassembling. Okay, so here we have the gauge cluster removed from the panel. You can see the panel's down here. So I've already swapped this out, so as you can see that now uses an electrical hookup, whereas the original mechanical one has a copper tube that goes into it to feed it pressure. So again, it's accurate, but you're then feeding hot oil directly into the passenger cabinet using this, and I have had these lines fail on me in the past. So yeah, always just a good bet to switch over to the mechanical. So anyways, this is what the original wiring harness looked like. It is such garbage, such hot garbage. So anyways, we're gonna get the things taken out of here that we need. So like we need all these lights back out from here to, again, hook up back here on the back side for illumination on the gauge panel. We also got this here. This is a Painless Performance wiring harness kit. So what we're gonna do is make our own new wiring harness for the car. Now what that does mean is if we come back in here, all of these wires here are part of the original wiring harness for the car. So we'll just need to go back through, re-identify those wires. Shouldn't be too hard. There's plenty of wiring harness diagrams out there. But we'll need to go through and reassign those so we can figure out where to hook up the harness at. And then these are the new lights here. Let me see if I can dig one of these out. There we go. So this is one of the new lights here. So much better quality. So that'll replace this guy here. We also have some additional ones like, what do we have here? So this one's an actual battery alternator warning light. I don't know if you can really see that there. We have another one for, that's another turn signal indicator, or that's the parking brake indicator. High beam. And yeah, this one is our, which one is this? This is another turn signal indicator. So I got these off of Amazon. I haven't used them before, so I'm hesitant to speak on the quality yet. We'll find out here in a minute, but they are definitely, I can already tell, more substantially betterly built than these guys here. Again, these are just some cheap, I think I got the entire pack of those off of Amazon for like $5 or something like that. Those I don't recommend. They are crap. These terminals back here break off super easily. I've gone through so many of those just from the terminals snapping off. And yeah, so let's start getting this torn down, get what we need out of here, and start figuring out how to wire this thing back up. Okay, so we got the panel stripped down here. Now I've added two more holes, one here and one here. Originally we just had this one up here, these two, and then that one. So it was turn signals, high beam, and the alternator charge light. What we're going to do instead is we're going to move the alternator charge light over to here. This will become the parking brake light and also the brake master cylinder warning light. This will be our oil pressure light, and then again turn signal, high beam, and your other turn signal here. So we're going to go ahead and get the gauges back in here and get our lights in, and then we're going to start figuring out this wiring. All right, and here's all the gauges and lights reinstalled. So you can see turn signal, oil pressure, parking, high beam, volt, and turn signal. All right, now that's all in there. We get to figure out how to hook all this crap back up. So that's next. Okay, so we're getting ready to hook up the harness here. So this is the Painless Performance harness that we'll be using to hook up the gauge cluster in the car. As you can see here, this is the actual harness piece itself. Quick disconnect. Should make for easy install and reinstallation of this gauge cluster here. Now how this works is this uses what's called a weather pack type of connector. You can see that there. So I have another style here that I can show you on really quick, because these sets only come with a certain amount of connectors and they're one-time use only, so don't want to necessarily waste one on a demonstration here. So this style that I have here is a weatherproof style one. The only difference is that this has like rubber grommets on it to prevent water from getting into here. So As you notice, I put this little rubber gasket on here on the wire first. Make sure you do that. Slide it into here so that the wire sticks out. You can see that. And then we have our Weatherpack style connector here. So we'll stick the wire in here. Now, get up in close on this. You can see that there's two sections here. One is where the bare wire is, and one is here, right around the insulated part. So this gets crimped in two stages, one right here on the bare wire and then one here on the insulated part. Once that's crimped, you pull the wire back in, it locks in place here via these tabs here, and then you slide your rubber grommet in and then close this, and that seals the whole system. Now again, this is on a weatherproof style. The one that we're using in the car, well, it's in the car, so it doesn't really need to be weatherproof, so it's a little bit of a simplified process. We're just going to slip the wire in through one side, put the Weatherpack connector on, and pull it back through. So not a lot of space in the car to film this while I'm doing it, so I'm going to go ahead and get it done really quick, and we'll take a look at the results once I'm done. Okay, so we got our car side harness put together here. We got the wire all kind of cleaned up and tied up here, so no longer massive rat nest of wires hanging out all over the place. But yeah, so this is the in-car side. So once we get the harness built out on the dash side, it'll snap into this, and everything should be good to go. One thing that I did screw up though in my previous segment, I mentioned having to pull the wire all the way through, crimp it, and then slide it back in. That is the case for the weatherproof ones, but this one being a non-weatherproof one, you can actually crimp the wire first and then just slide it in and it'll snap in here. Those little tangs on the end just snap into place here, so you don't need to pull through, crimp, and then pull back in. You can just crimp, then slide the wire in, and it'll snap into place. Anyways, so now that this is all cleaned up, we'll get over to the gauge cluster and start assembling that. Alright, so status update. We got our wiring all routed here. This looks so much cleaner than the last setup. I still gotta chop that, but anyways. Here's our wiring routing, looking all clean and tidy. Now we just gotta turn this into this. So we're gonna get cranking on that and we'll be back. All right, we're about to do a quick test run. We got our harness plugged in over here. Now, without bringing the whole dash in, I won't be able to test everything, but this should give me at least some idea. All right, we've got our oil lights, our parking brake light, our battery light. You can see that there. All right, so, we got our left turn signal, got our right turn signal. Parking brake disengages. All right. Well, that's about all we can test for now until we put the dash back together, but hey, progress. All right, we got the gauge cluster back in here. As you can see, it's lit up like a Christmas tree at the moment. But we have all of our instrument lights. Now the RPM, the tachometer here, the gauge is a little bit dimmer than the rest because I switched all the other gauges over to LEDs. I have to wait on the tach though, because all of these other ones use a standard kind of like T10 size bulb, whereas the tach uses like a T5 bulb, which I could only find those on like Amazon. So I'm having to wait for that to come in. But again, you can see our battery, our parking brake, and our oil pressure gauges are on. Let me hit the high beams here. High beam comes on correctly. The turn signals, again, there's a little bit of weirdness going on with that right now, and that's simply just because I'm switching over the lights on the exterior over to LED, and there's some weird feedback issues with that I'm having to work out, but that's a different project for a different day. Still though, they flash correctly. Those are good to go. Our dash is rebuilt. Now we just need to kind of button this up. The last thing I need to check is the oil pressure gauge here to see if it picks up signal. The camera will focus. But this is just kind of sitting in here at the moment, so I need to button this up and get it all screwed back together. So I'm going to take care of that really quick, then we're going to get the car cranked over and see if we get our oil pressure reading. Alright, here we go. First crank test to test for oil pressure. So something's definitely gone a little cattywampus there. Alright, so we got new sender installed. As you can see, our oil light turns on. Oil pressure is currently reading 0. Oil light goes off. We're up to right around 50 psi. Good to go. Okay, so as I wrap up this video, there's one thing I want to address really quick. When you're working on these projects, take your time with it. I got hungry, I got tired, I rushed, and I didn't really pay as much attention as I could. So earlier in a clip, I showed how I was reading this high oil pressure and my oil pressure light wasn't turning off. And I bought into some Google research that this meant that the sender was bad. Well, I wasted 2.5 hours sitting in traffic, driving down to Summit, dropped $30 on a new sender, just to realize I had crossed my oil pressure warning light signal and my oil pressure signal in my wiring diagram. Or well, sorry, my pinout was correct, but when I actually hooked it up to the pressure sending unit, I got them backwards. So this is just a good, healthy reminder to slow down, take a minute, double check everything, and cut any loose ends where you need to, and just make sure you got it right the first time instead of, again, I wasted half my day messing around with this trying to get it going again. But new gauge cluster wiring is in, everything works, all the lights are working, and at this point the only thing we're waiting on is new LEDs for the tack. Once that comes in, we'll pop those in and we should be done. Also, just to wrap up this video, these gauges, if you're curious, they're from a company called Equus. You can see possibly on the bottom of the gauge here their website, iequus.com. They're cheap. These are definitely like AutoZone, O'Reilly's, that kind of level of gauge. So they're not super high-end gauges, but I mean, they work. I'd say for this full set, so the battery, the fuel, tack, speedo, temp, and oil pressure gauges. And again, this also depends on if you do mechanical or electronic. Electronic ones are obviously going to be more expensive than mechanical. If you go mechanical, you could probably be into this whole set for under $200. With me doing electronic for both the water temperature and oil pressure gauge, probably pushes the price closer to the $250 range for this full gauge setup. They're, again, like I said, they're cheap. I mean, they work, they're fairly accurate. The only major issue I really have is the speedo is pretty noisy. I mean, even with some like road noise going on and everything, you can hear clicking coming from the speedo. That's about my only qualm with it though. Like I said, everything else is pretty accurate and works pretty well. Anyways, that's going to do it for this week's video. We'll catch you next time.